A large section of the audience have wanted a proper Lucha Libre video for quite some time. It's something we've dipped our toes into a little bit here and there, declaring our love for the likes of El Solar, El Hijo del Santo, Negro Navarro and Negro Casas. But yes, it is time for something full on. And there is possibly no better subject for a first Lucha video on the channel than one single match. Atlantis vs Villano III, March 17th, 2000. It's mano y mano, Mascara contra Mascara, a battle between an all-time great Technico and an all-time great Rudo, something that's immediately accessible and easy to understand even for those who've never seen a single Lucha Libre match. You'll always find it on lists of the greatest ever Lucha matches, the greatest ever Mask matches. It's watchable through a simple search on YouTube, and it's a perfect starting point for anyone who wants to get into Lucha. Over the course of 25 minutes, Atlantis and Villano III don't just put together an all-time classic, they basically tell a history lesson of Lucha Libre in the 20th century, with callbacks and references to so many greats, alongside it being a definitive moment in both of their legendary careers. This is a match that's incredible to watch if you simply put it on without knowing anything beforehand, and having some context to go along with it only improves matters. And so let's get on with looking at one of Lucha's greatest ever bouts. Before we get to the match, we naturally need a bit of a primer on the two people involved. They certainly deserve that. First up we have Villano III, Villano III, the elder of the pair, and a part of Los Villanos, or the Villains, one of Lucha's most famous Rudo clans. All five Villanos are the sons of one Jose Diaz Velasquez, known to audiences as Rey Mendoza, and a highly successful luchador himself. Unlike Los Villanos, Rey Mendoza largely worked maskless throughout his career, but it's quite common for the sons of famous luchadors to become masked wrestlers, or enmascarados, because, of course, it helps to hide their identity. In fact, the main reason why Los Villanos wore masks was because Villano I and Villano II, when they debuted in 1969, actually used them to hide their identity from their own father, who didn't necessarily want his sons to follow him into wrestling, although he did train and mentor them as well as his other three sons once he learned that Uno and Dos were already working under masks. Of the five Villanos, Villano III is the most decorated and generally regarded as the most talented. He debuted in 1970 and largely worked as a singles competitor, while Villanos I and Segundo worked as a tag team. Of course, all of Villanos won many belts and accolades. They were, for over 20 years, one of the very top acts in the Universal Wrestling Association, or UWA, particularly during their legendary feud in the 80s with another great lucha family, Los Brezos. The UWA is a name that's faded into history nowadays, but it was the most successful lucha promotion for a time in the 1980s, surpassing Empresa Mexicana de Lucha Libre, or EMLL, the promotion it originally broke off from in 1975, and Los Villanos were a major part of that success. Villano III won many titles, being UWA's first world champion and a multi-time holder of the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship, which despite the name and origin actually belonged to the UWA from its debut in 1981. Still, Villano III's crowning glory is his record in lucha de apuestas, or wager matches. These are the ones where masks and hair are put on the line, and Villano III won enough of them to open up a mask and wig shop. Prior to the 2000 match against Atlantis, Villano III had put his mask on the line no less than 83 times, and that's just what's recorded. It's estimated that over his whole career, he wrestled well over 200 lucha de apuestas, and, well, he'd been wrestling for 30 years at this point, and he still had his mask. Despite having the name of Le Villain, Villano III didn't necessarily always work as a rudo, or heel. There were plenty of times over the years when he was on the Technico, or face side, particularly his famous feud against Perro Aguayo, and Villano III is the rare sort of luchador who excels at both rudo and Technico, someone who basically everybody loves no matter what, who had a peel across the floor. A legendary example, really. Atlantis' allegiance, back in 2000, was a bit more clear-cut. Ever since his debut in 1983, he had always been a Technico. As Technico gets, in fact. This is, after all, a luchador whose primary nickname is El Ídolo de los Niños, or the Idol of the Children, due to his immense popularity with younger lucha fans. He's always been with the same promotion too. While Los Villanos switched to AAA for a couple of years in 1995 following the UWA's bankruptcy, before switching to what was now by this point Consejo Mundial de Lucha Libre, or CMLL in the late 90s, Atlantis is a CMLL lifer, always with the two-fish mask, always a favourite of the fans. I guess that the best word to describe a guy like Atlantis is consistency. While there aren't too many times over his career where Atlantis would be considered the absolute numero uno technico, he would always be in the top 3, and that's been the case virtually since his debut. Similarly, there may be luchadors that are more skilled in the ring than he is, but Atlantis has always operated at a very high level. You can put the house on him being very damn good every single time out in any sort of match. He's simply always there. That's why the guy's lasted so damn long at the top, and why he, just like Villano III, is an all-time great. That rock-solid excellence was true of Atlantis in 2000, and even if he may have lost the odd step or two, it is still pretty much true of him now. Even though age may limit him a bit, he still knows how to just get the crowd eating out of his hand. Anyway, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves there. Just like Villano III, Atlantis has many accomplishments, many titles in singles, tag and trios, and there have of course been the big feuds complete with Lucha de Apuestas bouts. Atlantis hadn't wrestled nearly as many Lucha de Apuestas as Villano III, but he'd already had a couple of big ones, particularly against Kung Fu and Mano Negro in 1990 and 1993 respectively, the latter match headlining CMLL's 60th anniversary show. When Villano III made his full-time return to CMLL in the autumn of 1998, he and Atlantis were put against each other pretty quickly, on the opposing side of many a tags and trios match, and this would continue all the way through 1999 as their rivalry heated up. They're the centrepiece of nearly every match they're involved in. When they go at each other, they go at each other hard. Villano III uses every rudo trick in the book, Atlantis will brawl violently right from the off, the hatred and the blood will flow, and a lot of the time, well, it's all the other participants in a match can do to just get the hell out of their way. It was the 13th of June 1999 when they had their first big mano y mano main event, over the World Light Heavyweight title that Atlantis had won from Dr. Wagner Jr. the previous month, with Atlantis winning their first single skirmish. He'd win their second one too on the 3rd of August, although that one came as a result of a disqualification. As soon as they started feuding, a Mascara Contra Mascra bout between the two legends was always on the cards, and it was first really teased at CMLL's 66th anniversary show on the 24th of September with what's called a Relevos Increíbles match. You take two feuding luchadors and pair them up against another team of feuding luchadors, usually with the losing team going straight from that bout into an apuestas match. In this instance, the team of Atlantis and Villano III faced off against Mr. Niebla and Shocker. However, Atlantis and Villano III would come out on the winning side, with the eventual result being Shocker losing his mask in the main event against Niebla. Villano III would come up short once again on his next attempt at Atlantis' title on 27th of September, but he would finally win it on the 22nd of November 1999 at a sadly unrecorded show in Tampico. By the time we get to February 2000 and Villano's successful defence of the belt against Atlantis, defeating him 2-1 in a 10-minute blast at Arena Mexico, well, it's gone far beyond the strap, and there's only one way to settle matters. In Lucha Libre, championship belts tend to carry a little bit less importance than they do in other countries, certainly when compared to winning Lucha de Apuestas, and especially when it's Mascara contra Mascara. Even as they're spending months feuding over the light heavyweight title, Villano III is always saying that what he really wants is Atlantis' mask, and likewise Atlantis really wants Villano III's mask. A 2016 Voices of Wrestling article on this feud and match by J.R. Goldberg that I found sums it up best, so I will paraphrase from that. Winning a belt or a trophy is cherished, but fleeting, and one day it will be lost. Winning a mask, on the other hand, well, that's forever. You will always be known as the one luchador who won that mask, and nobody can take that away from you. Your name will always be there. On the other hand, well, for those luchadors who wear a mask, it's everything. It's their identity, it's their heart. There are certainly wrestlers, in fact plenty of them, who would continue to be successful after losing their mask, but there would always be a permanent change in them, and for many that change would be the beginning of the end, a luchador never quite being the same after they lost their mask. As with any big change, it depends on what you do afterwards, how you adapt to do something that's entirely new. It is so much more important, so much more career changing than the other main wager. Losing hair may temporarily humble a luchador and bring them to heel, but it soon grows back. A mask, on the other hand, that cannot be replaced, and this is why Mascara contra Mascara is the biggest match there is in Lucha Libre. As far as the match on February 11th 2000 goes, Villano wins this match using some rather sneaky tactics. Atlantis triumphs in the Segunda Caída, that is, second fall, using his trademark La Atlantida spinning torture rack backbreaker, and this move seemingly causes Villano III to suffer a very serious injury, leading to him being carried out of the ring by Villano's Cuatro and Quinto, a team that WCW watchers of the period will be familiar with. With Villano III out of the arena, it looks as though Atlantis will be victorious, until suddenly Villano III comes back out, fresh as a daisy, catching Atlantis unawares, and after just 2 minutes he makes him submit with El Cristo Negro, the front face lock chicken win that's the trademark submission of Los Villanos. It's a miracle, really. Clearly Villano III got a new lease of life. It totally wasn't Villano Quinto coming out for the Tercera Caída wearing Villano III's costume. Any suggestion of such a thing occurring is a preposterous insult. In any case, Atlantis is understandably rather irritated with the tactics that Villano III used to win the match, and so he gets on the microphone to officially issue the challenge. It's time for them to put their legendary masks on the line. Villano III, the real one this time, finally has the opportunity he wanted, and naturally he accepts the challenge. The match takes place on March 17th at Arena Mexico at an annual show appropriately called Juicio Final, or Final Judgment, with the tagline Homenaje a dos leyendas, El Santo y Salvador Lutuoff, or a homage to two legends, El Santo and Salvador Lutuoff, paying tribute to respectively the biggest star in lucha history and the founder of CMLL. It's not totally a one-match show, but everything else is utterly small potatoes compared to the big fight, the most talked about and hyped Lucha de Apuestas match in quite some time, with the show itself broadcast via pay-per-view. It's not strictly CMLL's first ever pay-per-view event as far as I can tell, but they didn't run full-on pay-per-views very often. The card is an exceptionally hot ticket. It more than sells out the 16,500 capacity Arena Mexico, with 4,000 standing room only tickets put on sale the day before. In the end, a little over 20,000 were in attendance for the show, making it one of the highest attended in Arena Mexico history, and even that might be a conservative estimate, seeing as there were also reportedly around 2,000 fraudulent tickets floating around, sold by scalpers on the night of the show. And with all this gone through, it's probably about time that we look at the big match itself. I will try my best to add as much historical context as I can as we go through the bout. I'm certainly no expert, but this bout was my own introduction to proper Lucha Libre back in the day, and it's still one of the best introductions to Lucha that you can find. The entrances are pretty big as you might expect, the crowd absolutely roaring from the get-go. However, the traditional roles are a little bit reversed. Villano III has most certainly been the rudo throughout this whole feud, but he's largely getting cheered by the Arena Mexico audience, whereas there's actually a fair bit of booing for Atlantis. Once we have all the introductions, we get a bit of a dispute even before the bell has run due to the ref that's assigned to the match, one Babe Richard. On one hand, he is undoubtedly an experienced ref. On the other hand, he is also a rudo ref, a former luchador himself, and not someone who Atlantis wants to referee the match. This is far too important about to have the referee's leanings potentially influencing matters. Eventually, Atlantis gets his way. Babe Richard is sent away with Villano's agreement, and we have a more neutral referee, Rafael Maya, taking his place. In many ways, this sets the tone for what we hope to get out of this. No devious tricks, no outside interference, no more games. Simply two of the very best going at it. Whether it's Atlantis or Villano III who comes out the victor here, we're at a point where neither wrestler wants there to be any further debate about it afterwards. It's all pretty simple. This is one fall to a finish. The pair can't help but take a moment after the bell rings, just before clashing, to take in the immense energy from the crowd and look around, Villano cracking a smile. It's all a bit like Rock vs Hogan from a couple years later. At last the pair start to feel each other out, playing the hand slap game, both taking it in turns to go behind from there, the crowd still thoroughly backing Villano. Atlantis succeeds in picking a leg and working Villano's left arm. Lucha predominantly works the left side of the body as opposed to the right. Villano quickly flips and upkicks out of it, but Atlantis continues his work after a beautiful arm drag. Another kick up isn't enough to stop the hold, but Villano gets up at the second time of asking and uses a head scissors to take Atlantis over. The match so far being pure in style, all based around lave. Not just the Mexican word for hold, but also representing a certain style of lucha, less acrobatics and more pure technique. Atlantis eventually bridges to release the pressure and flips out, and reset again. Atlantis goes for the first big strike, but Villano dodges it. Villano now works the arm, getting Atlantis down into an armbar. They're in the ropes, but, well, Villano doesn't immediately release the hold, disputing with the ref over it. We have been on a knife edge since the bell run, and this first bout of illegality is enough to escalate matters wildly. Now the crowd begin to boo Villano, Atlantis shoves him, and we start brawling. Villano responding with strikes, getting Atlantis down and tearing at his mask, ripping nearly half of it off Atlantis' face. More shots send the Technico reeling, a kick, slap and clothesline sending Atlantis to the outside, and from here, we get one of the many huge moments in this match. A tope suicida is one of the signature aerial assaults of Lucha Libre, diving through the ropes to the outside for what is basically a flying headbutt. It's a move that goes back a long way. This is one of the most famous and best executed topes of them all, a balletic cruise missile from Villano that connects with nothing but cranium, so violent that it could have fused the rivals' heads together, and perfectly set up beforehand by the ripping of Atlantis' mask, exposing the head for maximum damage like he's some sort of technico final boss. Of course, it's called a tope suicida for a reason. Villano takes a fair bit of damage from this too, part of his pink mask turning a rather ugly shade of red, but Atlantis utterly takes the worst of it. His mask's ripped apart and he's bleeding profusely to the point where the doctor has to check on him just to see if he can continue. A couple of minutes going by until both competitors are in a fit enough state to get going again. Usually topes are beautiful, honestly one of my favourite aerial moves, but they're common, a part of the ebb and flow in all styles. This is the tope where, for a time, it all stops, and the crowd and commentary go wild for all of it. We started with a large section of the crowd booing Atlantis. However, after this sequence the crowd are pretty thoroughly behind him all the way, and you see just how easy these two make crowd control look. They're in command of the story they want to tell here, and everyone is along for the ride. Finally, after some time recuperating, Atlantis makes his way back to the ring, and Villano's quick to continue the punishment, punching and even headbutting the cut, willing to hurt himself so long as it further wrecks Atlantis. The butt does give Atlantis a bit of time, however, and he comes back with some knees and hammers while Villano's still on the apron. He tries to do a hanging suplex to bring Villano back in, but Villano shifts weight, reversing with a beautiful casita, or cradle, for a near fall. Atlantis gets buttered back to the outside, and Villano's happily dancing around in the ring, showing that he's fresh as a daisy, the experience of winning so many apuestas on full show. Atlantis surprises Villano on his return with a sunset flip for a near fall of his own, but Villano is still in control, throwing kicks at the downed Technico in the corner, a slap knocking Atlantis for 6. Villano locks in the first major submission. It's La Cavernaria, a stretch invented by legendary luchador Cavernario Galindo back in the 1940s. Villano wrenches away, but Atlantis will not quit, and this move starts what's really the main body of the match, the point where both Villano and Atlantis go through some of the most devastating and famous laves in the history of lucha. This isn't just a mere exchange of submissions and pinfalls, it's a sequence where every move is a part of lucha legend, and perhaps no move is more legendary than Villano's next attack. He mounts Atlantis' back and applies Quebradora de Caballo, the camel clutch, which is of course the move made famous by El Santo, although it was actually created for him by Gory Guerrero. It's a big deal indeed because generally speaking, no one in Lucha uses the move at this time except Santo's son, El Hijo del Santo. It's got too much legend associated with it. Not here though. This time Atlantis is able to break the hold, and now it's his turn to attack. He positions his knees on Villano's back and turns him over into a bow and arrow hold. However, Villano explodes out, landing hard on Atlantis' stomach, and even having the nerve to try a cocky pin from it, going all tranquilo and still trying to show he's in front. Atlantis tries to recover, but Villano barely lets him, pulling him into a Renera. However, Atlantis' legs are in the ropes. Villano's next move is applying El Tirabuzon, what's often commonly known as an abdominal stretch, but another move with a long history and lucha background, going back to Jack O'Brien, a legendary Mexican wrestler despite the name, and the 1940s. Atlantis tries to power out, but Villano turns it into a pin and gets another close fall. Villano transitions from this straight into something a bit more modern, the inverted Deathlock STF, what we usually call a Muta lock, and of course it's the creation of Keiji Muto. Still, Atlantis won't quit. Atlantis makes a response, hitting an arm drag and eventually working Villano into a cradle, still trying to catch him out, but once again only getting two. Villano is becoming dominant now, however. Once again he puts Atlantis in major trouble, trapping the arms and stretching Atlantis quite hideously in a variation of his favoured Cristo Negro, the sort where you fully see the blood loss and the pain, and yet he continues to resist, countering Villano and applying a submission of his own. Now he himself applies Quebradora de Acabello, figuring that if Villano's going to bastardise Santo for his own dastardly Rudo needs, he should also invoke him and take the move back for the good guys, mainly using the move to transition into another telling hold, La Campagna or the Rocking Horse, another lucha classic, another hold that's finished many matches for many people, the pain of which cannot be overstated, and yet again another move that's resisted, using his head to good effect to break the hold and make another pin attempt, coming up short once again. It's amazing how every single move we've seen is such a big deal, and we're nowhere near through yet. Villano gestures to the crowd, Atlantis quickly wipes the blood from his eyes, his white mask far beyond crimson, and both wonder what on earth they can do next. We miss the setup for shots of the enraptured crowd, but Atlantis does attempt another cradle, getting another near fall, Villano's explosion out of the pin nearly knocking out Ref Maya. Villano applies a pinning predicament of his own using a mousetrap, a variation on La Magistral, and it's not enough, the crowd getting wilder and louder with every close call. Atlantis gets a boost, applying the next big submission, the old classic Boston Crab, known as El Cangrejo in Lucha. It's not enough to get the win, and while Atlantis does try and get energy from the crowd, he almost gets defeated by a quick O'Connor roll from Villano. The two continue to strike at each other, Villano getting Atlantis into the corner with some nasty jabs and posting him. However, Atlantis dodges the running attack and is nearly able to roll Villano up himself. The effort still weighing heavy, Atlantis falling into Ref Maya, trying another cradle when Villano gets up and still not getting it. Villano for his part reverses a backdrop into a sunset flip for a near fall, but still Atlantis reverses a posting attempt, and while he gets flipped on the run, he lands on the apron, barges Villano to the centre, and hits a huge body press off the top rope, but Villano rolls through and ends up on top. It's the closest near fall yet, and frankly another amazing sequence in a match that's filled with them. You do get a lot of looks into the crowd and you can see how giddy they are. Everyone is utterly taken in by what they're watching, completely consumed by the battle. Atlantis now tries the legendary Hurricane Rana, another long-storied move innovated by Huracan Ramirez. Villano kicks out and has to get up using the ropes, but in doing so he's drop-kicked to the outside. He tries to close the distance to stop an aerial assault, but Atlantis kicks him back into the front row and instead goes to the top rope for an absolutely picture-perfect plancha. This move, executed so well despite all Atlantis has been through, seemingly takes everything up to another level, potentially giving Atlantis a decisive advantage as we head into what's going to be the finishing stretch. Atlantis tries to pin Villano back in the ring, but it's only two. He goes in for another attack, but this time Villano catches him out and locks him in one of his favourite holds, La Media Cerejera, locking up the arm, the leg around the neck. Villano has finished many opponents with this hold, the sort where there's nowhere to go and submission is often instant. And yet Atlantis holds as long as possible until, with a burst of strength, he's able not only to break it, but to reverse. He now has Villano's legs stretched around his head, grabbing the arms and trying to get a nudo-style pin out of it, but as ever the shoulders are up. Still, Villano is now suspended in the air, trapped in a take on El Nudo Lagunero, the move favoured by a great and more contemporary luchador, Blue Panther. Villano has to use all of his upper body strength seemingly just to stop being pinned, until suddenly he ascends majestically, stands, and flips Atlantis over for a near fall of his own. Just freaking incredible at this stage of the match. We have distance between the two warriors now, Atlantis running in to try another Hurricanrana. This time Villano uses the momentum to reverse again, Atlantis' shoulders down, but there is no third mat slap from Ref Maya. Villano runs Atlantis in to try and flip him, but El Idolo is ready. He grabs those arms, turns him over, and we have another legendary submission, the Gory Invertada, a variation of Gory Guerrero's Gory Special, as fabled and storied a move as you can possibly get. Villano desperately tries to reach for the ropes, things look utterly bleak, until again Villano uses that upper body and turns it into another sunset flip. How on earth? The drama went off the charts long ago, but they're still ratcheting it up. Villano goes for some impact. He hits Atlantis with a big clothesline, followed by a leg drop and then a senton. Again, these are all big parts of his moveset, very much amongst his favourite moves, and having executed them he looks for the trademark hold of Los Villanos, El Cristo Negro, the double chicken win face lock. However, Atlantis reverses, cradles him, and with that, it's still not over. Villano kicked out. Villano is seemingly shocked both at Atlantis' reversal and at himself for escaping it in time. Villano slowly gets up, preparing himself to run in again, looking for another clothesline, and this time Atlantis is ready. He grabs Villano and spins him around onto his back. This is his own killer submission, La Atlantida, the spinning torture rack, in the centre of the ring. 99 times out of 100, there is no escape. Atlantis wrenches it, prepares for the finish where he falls to his knees, and just before he does, Villano III breaks it. He survived. If you think the crowd and commentary went wild before, this takes it to another level. Virtually no one escapes La Atlantida once it's locked in. There are so many moments in this match, but, well, this might just be the greatest one. Villano hits Atlantis with another clothesline, but the effect on his back is very clear. You don't simply shrug off La Atlantida. And yet there's a twisted grin from Villano, perhaps marvelling at the absurdity of all this, how this has reached levels where no one has gone before. Even he doesn't know how he was able to escape. After a brief reset, Villano goes for another clothesline but misses, and Atlantis hits a dropkick. There's no quick attack, however, as Lee's luchadors have given absolutely everything. With one final burst, Villano tries to run in once more, going all or nothing, and he's caught. He's spun, and he's on the back again. Atlantis locks in La Atlantida for the second time, rushing to the centre, spinning around, and falling to his knees. And shortly after he does, Ref Maya jumps about 7 feet into the air, calling for the bell. The match is over. In 25 minutes 28, Atlantis finally made Villano III say no mas with his second La Atlantida, and in doing so he claimed Villano III's mask. It's an absolute explosion of emotion. The crowd is deafening, Atlantis is hugged by his cornerman, Hueo de Jalisco Jr., his arms raised, and then gloriously, Villano III puts him on his shoulders. Atlantis is almost disbelieving, but the moment is such a real one, Villano giving full respect and praise to Atlantis' achievement, and, well, celebrating what they've just done out there. The post-match? I'll do my best, but my own words won't be enough. Villano brings his young son to the ring, who will be Villano III Jr. many years later, and following replays of the winning moment, Villano III is interviewed. The moment is at hand. His father, the 70-year-old Rey Mendoza, hands shaking with emotion, is here to do the honours. Villano says that he's not leaving sad, he's leaving happy, as he fulfilled a promise to the public that this match was going to be a clean one, and that even though Atlantis was better tonight, it's not forever. He has no excuses, as Atlantis beat him fair and square. He thanks the public for his support and says he will continue to fight, mask or no mask, and he gives further praise to Atlantis for being a great luchador. Villano III undoes the final knots, and the mask is off. This is Arturo Diaz Mendoza, 48 years old, with a face that tells the story of thousands of legendary battles, this night being the greatest one of them all. With his son in his arms, he says that he's still ready to fight, to take on all comers, and with that he gives up the mask to Atlantis, who himself is now interviewed. Atlantis thanks the public, says that this was the mask he desired the most, talks about how much it's cost him, and says it's for the people. He says that Villano III is the toughest wrestler he's ever faced, but that he trusted in himself, in God, and in his family, and that's who he credits for coming out on top. He says he'll never tire of the support he's given, and that he now feels the power of Villano III through the mask he now holds in his hands. We get to sign off, once again, with Villano III, who says that he fights as a rudo because that's what's in his blood, but first and foremost he fights for the public. Rey Mendoza, overcome with emotion, thanks the public for their love and respect, not simply for Los Villanos, but for Lucha Libre as a whole. And with that, the broadcast is wrapped up. Again, my words are scarcely enough. This is the greatest mask match, perhaps the greatest Lucha Libre match, one of the greatest matches ever. What Atlantis and Villano III did here atop their own personal struggle, the feud that had built over 18 months to this night, was attempt to tell a whole history of Lucha Libre in the 20th century, a story that went back all the way to the first legends of the art form. Nothing here is a mere exchange of holds, of submissions and pins. Every last second carries huge meaning, often referencing all those who came before: El Santo, Gory Guerrero, Huracan Ramirez, Cavernario Galindo, and many more. You could write a whole book on this match. That's what they were able to convey over the course of 25 minutes. The drama's just off the charts. I mean, it's funny, we've just come off of a 4-part Zenjo Joshi series, a place where the style very much centres around near falls, where almost every move comes with a pin attempt. It works beautifully there, even if you know that the majority of pin attempts won't be successful. This feels different. There's a lot of near falls or near submissions, and every single one of them feels like a moment of serious jeopardy, an utterly believable match ender, a moment where you think that surely there's no escape, until somehow there is. It's simply breathtaking, a match you can't imagine how it feels to participate in. Everything Atlantis and Villano III did was in service of this story, of telling this history, of going through the past of Lucha Libre, of taking it to its core of two men in desperate struggle, putting their whole identity on the line, looking to prove that on this night they're the best. And in the finish, they bring it all to the present, Atlantis finally overcoming Villano III with his move, La Atlantida. It's simply flawless. And then, to top it all off, the post-match, Villano celebrating with Atlantis, his reveal, his promo, the waves of emotion. It's one of those wrestling moments that brings a tear to your eye. Villano III will always be Villano III, mask or no mask, and now he is also Arturo Diaz Mendoza. You may well lose something big when you lose a mask, but you can also gain something too, and the reveal of this great man, this veteran warrior, only seems to make the public love him even more. Now of course, the match has a concrete result. On March 17th, 2000, Atlantis defeated Villano III, and he took his mask. But in another sense, well, this feels like a rare match where there are no losers, where that record pales in comparison to just what Atlantis and Villano III achieved on this night, what they built, the story they told. Not just one of the best matches in the history of Lucha Libre, one of the best matches in the history of wrestling. You could watch it many times over and find something different to love about it on each and every go around. What about? As the commentators said many times over the course of the contest, increíble. Atlantis vs Villano III quite rightly received universal acclaim. In Mexico, it was big enough a deal for it to be covered in the regular sports sections and newspapers, immediately entering the space in the pantheon reserved for the most legendary of clashes. In the rest of the wrestling world, where Lucha Libre often doesn't get the attention it deserves, the match was also celebrated. Naturally, we go to the pages of The Observer, where the bout got an exceptionally positive write-up, Meltzer talking about how it was comparable to an old-school Jack Briscoe Dory Funk Jr. style main event, which kind of does it a little injustice, I feel. One thing about this match is, even if it is of an older, Larve-based style, it's still a pretty quick affair, the two luchadors throwing the equivalent of Rocky-style haymakers at each other, only their submissions and pins. This isn't about where they spend a good 5 minutes working a headlock. Not that there's anything wrong with that per se, but there's barely any resting at all, scarcely a moment to catch your breath. Anyway, Big Man Meltz called it the best match he'd seen so far this year, and ended up giving it 4.5 stars, later up to 4 3/4. Which again I feel is a lower rating than what it deserved. I don't normally rag on what is essentially one man's opinion, but if this isn't a 5-star match, then frankly I don't know what is. Still, it's worth mentioning The Observer for other reasons. In what was overall a pretty good year for wrestling across the board, Observer readers voted Atlantis vs Villano III the 2000 match of the year, nearly 300 points ahead of the Royal Rumble match between Triple H and Cactus Jack. It was the first Lucha Libre match to win Match of the Year honours in The Observer, and it remains the only one to do so. Also, in 2010, Super Luchas, the top Lucha Libre magazine, said that Atlantis vs Villano III was the best match of the whole decade. Reactions aside, what about the wrestlers themselves? Villano III still had a good amount to give after losing his mask. Indeed, the match would result in him turning fully technico once again, at least for a while. He remained largely active in CMLL for a couple of years, then splitting his time between CMLL and the International Wrestling Revolution Group, or IWRG, for the rest of the 2000s, as well as other independent promotions. In the end, as old injuries caught up with him, his schedule was greatly reduced, and he decided to retire in 2015. I do kind of have to mention that his official retirement match, teaming up with Villano IV and Quinto to take on Los Psycho Circus at Triple H Triple Mania 23, is kind of an infamous disaster. And if there are people who only know Villano III, then 63 years old, for this one match, that needs to be rectified majorly. Not just by watching his classic with Atlantis, but so many other bouts against the likes of Perro Aguayo, the original Tiger Mask, Sangre Chicana, hell, even a certain young Canadian named Pegasus Kid, whose real name escapes me, and was yet another person that Villano III claimed a mask from. Sadly, Arturo Diaz Mendoza, the legendary Villano III and unquestionably one of the greatest luchadors of all time, passed away on August 21st, 2018 at the age of 66 due to a cerebral infarction, having dealt with various health issues in the preceding couple of years. As for Atlantis, well, he's still going. He is still El Ídolo de los Niños, although there have been a few complexities over the years. Famously, after so long being pretty much the most technico of technicos there ever was to technico, Atlantis turned rudo in 2005, joining up with top heel stable Los Guerreros del Infierno to create what would be known as Los Guerreros de la Atlantida. Unbelievable. He used to be El Ídolo de los Niños, now he's saying that vosotros niños metetele en el culo, hermano. The result was yet another banner year, the nightmare trio of the red-masked Atlantis, Ultimo Guerrero and Rey Bucanero wreaking havoc and destroying all who came in their way. The turn wasn't a short-term thing either, with Atlantis staying rudo for 6 years before at last going back to the good side and feuding with Ultimo Guerrero, the eventual outcome of this lengthy and bloody feud being, of course, another great Lucha de Apuestas, won by Atlantis. Another great Mascara Contra Mascara bout occurred in 2015, a match that spanned generations. La Sombra of the newly rudo Los Ingobernables battling Atlantis on September the 18th for CMLL's 82nd anniversary in a classic, the 52-year-old Atlantis rolling back the years and then some, and the 25-year-old La Sombra, who would end up losing the bout, being a perfect partner, another one of the world's best. Nowadays he is, of course, Andrade El Idolo. Atlantis still wrestles a pretty full schedule for CMLL to this day at the age of 63, although naturally his body has worn over time. But even if his work may be limited nowadays, he is still thoroughly loved and capable of getting the audience to do anything he wants. Both of these guys are legends, all-time great luchadors, nay, all-time great wrestlers, with many nights of glory to their name. But none were perhaps better than March 17th, 2000, when they came together with everything on the line, and in the end they both had something truly remarkable to show for it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and until the next time, bye for now.